Minnesota students are back in the classroom just months after a legislative session that saw significant new policies signed into law and boosting of public school funding. Senator Steve Cwodzinski is the chair of the Senate Education Policy Committee, and he joins me to talk about some of the changes coming to Minnesota's schools. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Governor Tim Walz has said he's open to calling a special session to either amend or repeal a new law that is prompting some police departments to pull school resource officers from schools due to concerns about the way the law is written. As both a former teacher and as a lawmaker, what are your thoughts on this issue, and should the law be clarified, and is it urgent?
Oh, there's a lot going on in that question, Shannon. Okay, I did teach for 33 years. I've realized the value that SROs have, school resource officers have in our schools. I think the relationship building and the mantra, the adage, takes a village. I really, truly believe that police officers, along with educators, are part of that village. So with all that said, though, however, I have found the last 2 weeks of my life so intellectually stimulating, because we're debating things like what does imminent harm mean, and what does reasonable versus unreasonable force mean. And to me, the educator, it just, means what it means. And I'm finding out, all these different stakeholders, and I've talked to chiefs of police, I've talked to the Minnesota Police Peace Officers Association, I've talked to school boards, I've talked to the League of Cities, and it's like everybody disagrees on the meaning of all those laws and all those words. And all I can tell people from my vantage point is, you have my word, we will have a hearing the first 2 weeks of session. That's my plan, that's my vision, and I want to invite all the stakeholders to the table so that in a public forum we can weigh in what we got right and what we got wrong on that particular bill. And I think it's a good bill as is. I think it's just been interpreted maybe not as accurately as I would have thought the intent of the bill was. But SROs, if a school district wants to have them, they should be allowed to have them. And so, anyways.
Okay. Well, in August, the Department of Education released testing data for 2023, which shows that roughly half of Minnesota kids are not meeting academic standards in math, reading, and science. I spent a little time pulling up individual districts across the state using the Minnesota report card, and every district that I looked at shows that fewer students are meeting or exceeding standards now than they were in 2019 before the pandemic. How do you view these results, and perhaps what needs to happen to get kids back where they were before the pandemic?
Oh, there's a lot of work to be done. The pandemic, I think we're realizing, my wife taught during the pandemic. All my colleagues when I left in 2016 are still teaching. They taught through the pandemic. I think our kids suffered more than maybe anybody else, except for families that lost loved ones. Obviously, they took the biggest burden through COVID, but our kids suffered. They really did. I don't know. I'm not pointing fingers at any decision makers that made the decisions they made about our schools, but nonetheless, the kids are hurting. They've suffered with mental health issues. They're struggling with social media issues, and I'm not surprised by those numbers going down, quite frankly. And I think that our kids have lost their way, many. And many are doing just fine, but the numbers suggest many have lost their way. And we put a lot of money into mental health and counselors and social workers and school therapists, and hopefully the kids that need that help will realize, oh my God, I have this wonderful life, and I have a wonderful school. But right now I think a lot of kids are questioning what the meaning of life is, and they're hurting. And I think that I don't know how a kid can be struggling with who they are and why they're here and do well on a test. And so I hope that the money we've spent on for counselors and social workers and such, and all that critical staff that our schools have, will help raise those numbers.
Some changes passed in the last session will not begin until next year, like the personal finance and civics requirements that we've talked about. But one new thing this year that I noticed is that students in 11th and 12th grade can earn up to 2 elective credits now for working in long-term care or child care facilities. Is this to help with the workforce shortage in those 2 areas and to encourage students to consider these as viable career paths?
I think that bill is a great idea. When I taught for 33 years, and one of the things I used to always tell my kids, don't let school get in the way of your education. And here's an opportunity to tell young people that are considering a field in memory care units and nursing homes and helping the elderly, give them the opportunity in high school to maybe earn a credit and help us with these shortages. My mom was just put into a memory care unit last year. I see the turnover. I mean, it's every month I go see her, and it's hard, and because every time there's a different nurse, but I've seen high school kids and college kids that are just there like helping, and they're so filled with, they make my mom feel special. And so I think this is a useful thing to get kids out of the cells and bells of their classroom seats and maybe help with our elderly population and give them credit and hopefully teach them, wow, this is a viable option, and this will be my career path now.
I hesitate to admit this, but as a kid, I had to stay in frequently during recess as punishment for talking during class. And I think I was just a kid who had a lot to say. Because of new laws passed last session, recess detention in grades K through 3 is limited to situations now where a student is likely to cause serious physical harm to other students or staff. Districts must compile statistics, and also withholding or delaying meals is prohibited. So what prompted these changes?
You know, first of all, I hope if you ever meet my wife, I want you two to have that conversation of what you guys were like in school, please. But with that said, I think the stakeholders that approached me that convinced me of this issue were those that said denying getting out on the playground and expelling all this energy is not the solution when a kid misbehaves and we need to punish them. And I just think it made sense to me that letting the kids go out to recess and getting rid of all that energy is the right thing to do for a kid that's acting up, and not letting all the kids go out to recess in the jungle gym, if that's even a thing anymore, and then Johnny has to stay behind because he misbehaved. That doesn't make any intellectual sense to me. So.
Another change families will notice has to do with active shooter drills. The new law includes definitions, parameters, and limits for the simulations, including parental notification requirement, the opportunity for families to opt their children out, and a prohibition on elements like simulated gunshots or blood that make these drills feel real. That said, the state will continue to require schools have lockdown drills. So what's the reason for the change?
Yeah, we have, I believe, 5 drills a year, tornadoes and fires, and now lockdown drills for our schools. And you know, I think I've told you this before, but the weirdest, saddest moment for me as a teacher were those times I'd walk back into a classroom after passing time, you know, pre-cell phones maybe, and I had to announce to the class, we had another school shooting today in fill in the blank. And the looks on my students' faces, I wished I had a hidden camera once, because their looks are like, can't you grown-ups deal with this? And I'm not here today to suggest what I think is the solution, but I hope you're much younger to maybe remember this, but those lockdowns, duck and cover drills I had in kindergarten and first grade, and now when I tell students about that, they laugh. And I hope young teachers today, 20 years from now, when they describe the lockdown drills and simulations, the kids laugh and go, well, what were those like? Because we don't need them anymore because we fixed it. I do agree that parents should be allowed to opt out, so that's a good thing, but it's sad that we've come to this state of affairs that that's another drill we need to have for our kids. But what was the question?
Just the reason for the change, but we're close to time, so
okay.
If you could just briefly
Sorry.
give me a topic that for sure you plan to bring up in the next legislative
Okay, well,
session?
first, let me tell you the thing I'm proudest of from the last session isn't civics and personal finance, it's menstrual equity. That this school year, every young person between the ages of 4th and 12th grade will have menstrual products available for them in our schools. But the thing I want to work hardest on this next session, a couple things come to mind. School discipline issues, our kids, another, I think, thing that came out of COVID was kids forgot maybe a little bit how to act civilly, with civility in front of the adults. So I want to do school discipline. I want to do a lot more for our kids' mental health. And then ultimately, I think the impending crisis of our generation may be a teacher shortage. And I know we spent some good money this last session on helping teachers choose that career, but I think we can do more.
Senator Steve Cwodzinski, thank you.
Thank you.